The coffee had gone cold hours ago. It sat untouched beside a wall of glass, the porcelain cup catching a sliver of Chicago's pale morning light as it spilled into the penthouse. Below, the city stretched wide, steel and stone gleaming like a battlefield in retreat. From 40 stories up, you couldn't hear the traffic or the sirens or the shouting. From this high, everything looked calm, controlled, predictable, just the way Nathaniel Ellis had built it. He stood at the edge of his living room, hands buried in the pockets of a tailored navy suit that had never seen a wrinkle. The skyline was his mirror, flawless, towering, intimidating. His reflection stared back in the glass. Perfect posture. No smile. Eyes sharp but tired in a way money couldn't fix. Tomorrow, he was getting married. To anyone else, that sentence would have carried weight. Joy, nerves, at least a flicker of anticipation. But Nate felt none of it. What he felt was pressure, neatly pressed between the folds of his made-to-measure life. The world called him brilliant, a visionary, the youngest founder ever to take a quantum software firm public and stay majority owner. Ellis Quantum Systems was now worth $16 billion. There were interviews booked for next week, a new product unveiling, a scheduled fireside chat at Stanford's business school, and a wedding. To Madison LeClaire, a name that graced fashion magazines and philanthropic galas in equal measure. She was poised, photogenic, Harvard-polished. She made sense. She matched the aesthetic. Still, Nate hadn't slept in 3 nights. His gaze drifted to the black credenza tucked into a corner of the room, where a single white envelope rested on top. No stamp, no address. The handwriting on the front was familiar, even after 6 years. Clean cursive, confident, Ava Monroe. He hadn't opened it. He told himself he didn't need to. The past was over, boxed and buried under press releases and quarterly earnings. But the letter remained, untouched, unmoved since the day it arrived, like a scar he refused to acknowledge. They had met before the IPO, back when his suits were off the rack and his apartment smelled like takeout and wet socks. She had been finishing her medical residency then. He still remembered how she'd fall asleep with her head on his shoulder, exhausted but glowing from a double shift, murmuring something about sick kids and too much coffee. They talked about dreams back then, his code, her clinic, their maybe someday. Then everything changed. Ava had vanished from his life the week the first investors came calling. Or maybe he had vanished from hers. It depended who told the story. Either way, he'd buried it deep. Until now. A buzz from his phone snapped him back. He glanced at the screen. Serena Vaughn, again. His COO, his fixer. The woman who helped him climb, no matter how many throats had to be stepped on along the way. Need final approval on seating chart. Call ASAP. He silenced it. Not today. Nate turned from the window and crossed the room to the credenza. His fingers hovered over the envelope. The air seemed heavier here, like the letter carried gravity. 6 years. Not a word. Not until last week when it showed up in a couriered box, slipped between reports and designer cufflinks. He picked it up. The paper felt soft, old, worn at the edges. He didn't open it. Instead, he slid it into the inside pocket of his blazer and exhaled slowly, as though the motion itself cost him something. Then he grabbed his keys and walked toward the elevator, pressing the button without thinking. He didn't know where he was going. But as the doors opened and he stepped inside, one thought burned behind his ribs like a lit match. She mattered once. Maybe she still does. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real reason he couldn't sleep. Not the wedding, not the cameras, not even the billions. But a woman who'd once held his heart when he had nothing. And might be holding something else now. Something he didn't even know he'd lost. The revolving doors of St. Mark's Children's Hospital spun behind Nate as he stepped into the bright, too cheerful lobby. Cartoon animals marched across the pastel walls, leading down hallways where the smell of disinfectant clung stubbornly to the air. Kids giggled in the distance. A baby cried somewhere out of sight. He shouldn't have come. This wasn't his world. This land of finger paints and IV drips, of quiet heroism that didn't make headlines or IPOs. But he was already here, standing like a monolith in the middle of it, out of place in his expensive coat and polished shoes. He cleared his throat and approached the reception desk. A middle-aged nurse looked up from her screen, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to curiosity with a pinch of suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, tone kind but brisk. "Yes," Nate said, adjusting his tie even though it didn't need adjusting. "I'm here to see Dr. Ava Monroe." The nurse's brows lifted slightly, just enough to register her surprise. "And you are?" He hesitated. "An old friend." The woman's eyes lingered on him for a beat, as if reading something beyond what he offered. Then she tapped the keyboard with deliberate fingers. "She's finishing a consult. You can wait over there." Nate turned to the row of plastic chairs that lined the wall. They squeaked beneath him as he sat. He hated how loud they sounded, how they made him feel small, exposed. Power didn't follow you into places like this. No matter how many zeros sat in your bank account, no one bowed to it here. A child darted past, maybe 5 or 6, all energy and noise. Dark curls bounced as he ran, laughter spilling from his mouth like a song he didn't know he was singing. "Eli, slow down!" a voice called after him. Warm, female, familiar. Nate's heart skipped. The boy skidded around a corner, nearly colliding with a cart of juice boxes. He turned, grinning, and for just a second, Nate's breath caught in his throat. The eyes, wide, brown, full of mischief. There was something in the shape of them. A mirror, maybe, or a memory. He blinked and looked away. The nurse called his name moments later. "Mr. Ellis?" He stood too quickly. His stomach tightened. "She's in room 112. He nodded, walking down the corridor that smelled faintly of crayons and lemon cleaner, the sound of his footsteps muted by vinyl flooring. He reached the door just as it opened, and there she was. Avenue white coat over navy scrubs, hair tucked behind one ear, shorter than he remembered. Her face had changed. Sharper lines, yes, but still the same clarity in her gaze. Still that quiet steadiness that once felt like home. She froze when she saw him, not surprised, just still. "Nathaniel," she said evenly. Not cold, not warm. "It's Nate now," he replied, managing a smile he didn't feel. She folded her arms. "Of course it is." A beat passed. "I wasn't sure you'd see me," he said, suddenly unsure why he thought this would be a good idea. "I didn't say yes. You showed up." Her voice was level, but the words struck like flint. He deserved that. I needed to see you." "For what?" He reached into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the envelope he'd carried with him since yesterday. He didn't pull it out. He couldn't. Not yet. "I'm getting married," he said instead. Ava blinked. Her expression didn't change, but something passed through her eyes. An old storm cloud, maybe. One she'd lived with long enough not to be caught in anymore. "Congratulations," she said simply. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he added, as if that would somehow make it less cruel. "To invite you." That got her. Her arms dropped slightly. "You came here, to this hospital, to invite me to your wedding?" He nodded. "To someone else." "Yes." Silence filled the space between them. Thick, unyielding. Ava stepped aside and gestured toward a bench at the edge of the hall. He followed her there, sitting on the end like he didn't belong. And maybe he didn't. "Why?" she asked finally, quieter now. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because you knew me before all this, before Forbes, before the suits. I thought you should see it, what I built." What you built, she echoed, her voice soft with something that sounded almost like pity. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just... A soft laugh cut through his words. Not mocking. Sad. You vanished, Nate, she said. Just gone. And now, after all this time, you show up with an invitation? What do you want me to do, clap? Number I don't know. You want to prove something, she said, nodding slowly. That you won. That you made it without me. That's not it. Isn't it? He looked at her then. Really looked. She hadn't hardened, not entirely. There was still something open in her, but it was guarded now, walled. I never stopped thinking about you, he said finally. She met his eyes, unwavering. I did. That landed harder than anything else. Before he could respond, her pager buzzed. She glanced down, then stood. I have to get back, she said. Of course. She turned to go, but then paused. You already sent the invitation, didn't you? Nate's mouth parted. How did you know? Ava looked back over her shoulder. Because I kept it, and because I knew you'd come looking when it was already too late. And then she walked away, leaving him with a hallway full of noise and a truth he couldn't deny. He didn't come to show her what he built. He came to see what he left behind. The sun dipped low over the skyline, turning the windows of Nate's penthouse into mirrors of molten gold. He stood barefoot in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, a glass of untouched bourbon sweating on the marble counter. The envelope sat beside it, still sealed. He hadn't eaten all day. The meeting with Ava had burned through him like acid, slow and quiet but impossible to ignore. He couldn't stop seeing her face, calm but not indifferent, strong but worn. She hadn't needed him to know how far she'd come, and she hadn't invited him to witness any of it, because he hadn't been there. He ran a hand through his hair, restless. His phone buzzed on the counter. Serena Vaughn, again. He let it ring. Instead, he picked up the envelope, the one she'd said she kept, the one he'd never opened. It was worn now at the edges, the paper softened by time. He turned it over in his hands like it might bite him. He didn't open it. Not yet. Outside, the city throbbed with neon life, unaware of the man unraveling inside its brightest tower. Across town, Ava Monroe stood at the kitchen sink, sleeves damp, a trail of soap bubbles down one wrist. Dinner dishes clattered in the background, plastic plates, mismatched forks, tiny cups with superhero logos. Chaos had a rhythm, and in her house it had names. Luca, please don't stand on the table. I'm not standing, Luca declared, barefoot and perched on his knees like a parrot. I'm observing. Observing what? Ava asked, drying her hands. Eli. He keeps putting peas in his juice. It's for science, Eli muttered, unbothered. Ava pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. And then Levi appeared, her quietest, most watchful boy, clutching something in both hands. Mom, he said carefully, is this yours? She looked down. A photograph, bent at the corners, one of the few she'd kept, buried in a drawer, unseen for years. In it she stood beside Nate on a rooftop, laughing, her head tipped back. His arm circled her waist like it had always known where it belonged. Her breath caught. Where did you find this? She asked softly, taking the picture from Levi's fingers. In your drawer, behind the Band-Aids. Eli looked up from his juice. Who's he? No one spoke. Luca leaned closer. Is that the coffee guy? Ava blinked. The coffee guy? Yeah, he said. The one from the hospital, with the shiny shoes. He stared at us like he knew us. A pause stretched between them. Not heavy, just unpracticed. Levi studied her with eyes too wise for 6. Is he our dad? Ava sank onto a chair, the photo still in her hands. She looked at her boys, their curls, their eyes, their stubborn little jaws. The way Levi's brows pulled together, how Eli's lips pressed tight when nervous. The exact way Nate used to when coding late into the night. They were his, so painfully his, and he didn't know. "Why doesn't he live here?" Eli asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because," Ava began, then stopped. She took a breath. "Because he doesn't know he should." Levi tilted his head. "Will you tell him?" Another pause. Then Ava nodded. "Yes, I think it's time." Luca clapped once. "So are we going to his wedding?" Ava looked up sharply. Levi frowned. "Wedding?" "He said he was getting married," she said, her voice barely audible. "He invited me." "Are we invited?" Luca asked. Ava stood and walked to the countertop, where another envelope sat, this one crisp and thick and elegant. She hadn't meant to take it when Nate left it behind. But she had. She hadn't opened it either. She ran a finger along the edge, then turned to her sons. "Do you want to come with me?" "To the wedding?" Levi asked. "Number to meet him." The boys looked at one another. There were no shouts, no jokes this time. Then Levi nodded. "Yes, but I don't want to call him Dad." "You don't have to," Ava said gently. "Not until you're ready. If ever." Eli stood and crossed to her, tucking his small hand into hers. "Will he like us?" She crouched, pulling him close. "He'll love you," she whispered, though a part of her wasn't sure she believed it. But it was time to find out. Later, after the boys were asleep, Levi reading by flashlight, Luca whispering stories to himself, Eli curled up with his blanket. Ava sat at her desk, the old photograph beside her. She reached into the drawer and pulled out a letter. Not the one Nate had carried. The original. The one she had written and rewritten and never sent. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Nathaniel, I heard 3 heartbeats today. Not mine. Not yours. 3. She stopped reading. She didn't need to go further. The woman who had written it was terrified and alone, and not the same woman who now held that letter in steady fingers. This wasn't about revenge or regret. This was about closure, about giving 3 boys the truth, and maybe, just maybe, giving herself the chance to write something new. Not a letter this time. A beginning. The boardroom at Ellis Quantum Systems gleamed with the obsessive polish of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast sharp lines of light across the lacquered oak table, while the Chicago skyline brooded silently beyond the glass. At the head of the table sat Serena Vaughn, immaculately tailored in charcoal gray. Her tablet rested in front of her, stylus in hand, but her eyes didn't move from the seating chart displayed on the screen. "Third row, left aisle," she said aloud, tapping the spot twice for emphasis. Across from her, Hannah, Nate's new director of communications, fresh from Columbia and 3 months into the job, shifted uneasily in her seat. Serena didn't look up. It's neutral, far enough from press exposure, close enough to see everything. But not be seen, Hannah offered carefully, trying to gauge the temperature of the room. Serena finally glanced up. Her expression was unreadable, her tone razor-sharp. Exactly. The air stilled. Somewhere in the distance, a printer hummed and a door clicked shut. "Nathaniel won't like that," Hannah said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "He doesn't need to like it," Serena replied smoothly. "He needs to protect the brand, and so do we." Hannah hesitated. "Still, Ava Monroe is—" "She's a footnote," Serena cut in, voice colder now. "One he left behind years ago. We don't invite old drafts to opening night." Hannah blinked, stunned by the casual cruelty of the metaphor. Serena leaned forward, folding her hands. Her voice dropped, velvety and low. "You want to make it here, Hannah? Learn this. Every man with $1 billion to his name has ghosts. The trick is keeping them off the guest list. Hannah didn't respond. She wasn't sure she could. She just nodded and scribbled something into her notepad that she'd probably never use. The door opened behind them. Nate walked in. No tie. Collar slightly open. His usual precision felt off, like he'd put himself together while pacing through fog. He stopped near the table, eyes on Serena. "We're not doing third row." Serena raised a brow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," he said. "Move her to the front." A beat passed. 2, maybe. "That's unwise," Serena said finally, calm but clipped. "It will invite speculation." "She's not a liability," Nate replied, folding his arms. "She's history. She's the mother of my—" He stopped himself, catching the words mid-air before they could land. His jaw tightened. She mattered. "And she's marrying someone else tomorrow?" Serena asked, eyebrow arching. "Because that's the only context where this decision makes any sense." Nate didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to the table, reached for the seating chart, and crossed out the name with a bold black line. Then, below the word Monroe, he wrote front row, aisle in block letters. "I'm not asking." Serena watched him. "You're making this personal." "I am." Her eyes narrowed. "What changed?" He hesitated. Then, "I saw her." Something flickered in Serena's expression. Not surprise, not fear. Something older, like memory. She sat back slowly, her spine still straight. "Nathaniel, I've managed your brand through 4 product failures, 2 class action threats, and a near fraud scandal during Series A. If you think I'll let you throw that all away for some last-minute sentiment—" "I'm not throwing anything away," he said. "I'm choosing something I didn't have the strength to choose before." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. "You know what I did, don't you?" He froze. Serena stood, eyes fixed on him. "The letters, the emails. I stopped them. I protected the company. I protected you." Nate didn't turn around. He stared at the door handle instead, like it might offer a way out that didn't involve shattering the last 6 years of his life. "You buried my past to build my future," he said, his voice low. "But it's not your choice anymore." Then he left. The door closed behind him with a whisper. Serena stood alone in the gleaming boardroom, her reflection faint in the glass. She stared down at the seating chart, where Ava's name now lived at the front of the room. She tapped the stylus once, then again, then deleted it entirely. Outside, the city buzzed. Inside, Serena began rewriting history, 1 line at a time. The late afternoon sun filtered through the worn blinds of Ava's living room, casting soft stripes across the carpet where a trail of crayons and Lego bricks stretched like evidence of a recent storm. On the couch, Ava sat with a cup of lukewarm tea she had reheated twice and never quite finished. The unopened wedding invitation sat on the coffee table beside her, untouched since the day Nate had left it behind. Across from her, Rosa leaned back in the armchair, arms crossed, one brow arched. She wore scrubs, still smudged with toddler fingerprints and juice stains, her curly gray hair pulled into a loose bun that had half collapsed hours ago. "So, let me get this straight," Rosa said. "He shows up out of nowhere after 6 years, says he's marrying someone else, and hands you a wedding invite like it's a housewarming gift?" Ava sighed. "I don't think it was about the wedding." Rosa scoffed. "No? Looked a lot like he was staging a victory lap." Ava looked down at the cup in her hands. "It felt unfinished, like he came searching for something but didn't know what it was." "Uh-huh," Rosa said, not hiding the skepticism. "And let me guess, you're thinking about going?" Ava didn't answer. "Not yet." Rosa leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Listen to me, Mija. You've worked too hard, too long, to be anyone's lesson in regret." Ava's throat tightened. This isn't about him. Rosa waited, watching her. It's about them, Ava said finally, her voice quiet but certain. They deserve to know who he is, and he deserves to see who they are. Rosa softened. She reached over, covered Ava's hand with her own. I know you want to do right by them, but doing right by them doesn't always mean standing in the fire. Ava looked up. I'm not standing in it. I'm walking them through it. There's a difference. A beat of silence passed between them, and then Rosa smiled faintly. You always were better with metaphors than I gave you credit for. They both laughed, the kind of laughter that comes when pain meets history and turns into something gentler. Rosa stood brushing cookie crumbs off her lap. Just promise me one thing. What? If he hurts them, even once, you walk. You don't explain. You don't give him chances. You grab your boys and you go. Ava nodded slowly. I promise. Rosa leaned over and kissed the top of her head before grabbing her keys. You're stronger than you think, Ava, but don't forget, you don't have to be strong alone. As the door clicked shut behind her, Ava looked at the invitation again. She picked it up this time, not to open it, just to feel its weight. Then she rose, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down a thin folder labeled Seattle. Inside were printouts, brochures, and a tentative offer letter from Seattle Children's, one of the top pediatric centers in the country. She'd applied on a whim 3 months ago, after a particularly hard night when Levi asked her why every cartoon family had a dad. It had been a quiet contingency plan, a door she never opened but kept unlocked. Now she wasn't so sure. Her eyes moved from the Seattle packet to the photo on the wall. The boys at age 2, all 3 in mismatched overalls, dirt smeared across their cheeks, grinning like wild things. This was their life, and it wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. She closed the folder and placed it face down. Not yet. That night, after the boys were tucked in, Levi snoring softly, Luca whispering made-up stories to his stuffed cheetah, Eli curled into a tight, silent ball. Ava sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She clicked into an old email draft that had never been sent. Subject, for when you're ready. The message was short, just a few lines. A breadcrumb trail of what she had tried to say before life buried the chance. She didn't edit it. She didn't even reread it. Instead, she opened a new draft. To Nathaniel Ellis at ellissystems.com. Subject, regarding your invitation. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then, slowly, she typed, I'll be there, but not alone. There are 3 little reasons I think you should meet. We'll come quietly. I don't need a seat. I just need you to look. She didn't sign it. She didn't have to. When she clicked send, her hand didn't shake. But her heart did. The breakfast table was chaos. It always was. 3 bowls of cereal, 2 spoons on the floor, 1 upside-down juice box leaking a slow, sticky trail across the tile. In the middle of it all, Ava moved like muscle memory, mopping, coaxing, brushing curls from foreheads, while mentally calculating how many minutes she had before someone declared war over a crayon. Eli, she said gently, we don't dip bananas in ketchup. But it's fruit and sauce, he reasoned, lips pursed in innocent defiance. Ava stifled a laugh. Still no. Across the table, Luca was drawing again, always drawing. He hunched over a scrap of printer paper, tongue sticking out in concentration as he filled in blocky figures with a blue marker. Who's that? Ava asked, pausing behind him with her coffee. Luca looked up. It's me and Levi and Eli. And who's that? She pointed to a 4th figure, taller, faceless. Luca shrugged. The tall man. Her heart stuttered. What do you mean, the tall man? I don't know. He's just there. Sometimes in dreams, or when I'm awake but my eyes are sleepy. She crouched beside him, gently brushing the curls from his forehead. "What does the tall man do?" "He watches," Luca said, matter of fact. "But not mean, just waiting." She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "Did you see him at the hospital?" Luca paused, then nodded. "He had shiny shoes." Ava's fingers trembled as she traced the outline of the faceless figure. She recognized it, though she'd never seen it before. Nate's height, Nate's stance, Nate's ghost, drawn into their lives by a boy who'd never known him. Eli crawled into her lap, still clutching a piece of toast. "Mom, when we meet him, can I ask him something?" Ava held him tighter. "Of course, baby. Anything." He hesitated. "Will he like Star Wars?" She smiled softly, burying her face in his hair. "I think he'll have to." Across the city, Nate sat at his kitchen island, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, staring at the email Ava had sent just before midnight. "I'll be there, but not alone. There are 3 little reasons I think you should meet. We'll come quietly. I don't need a seat. I just need you to look." He'd read it 15 times. He'd also deleted it once, then restored it, twice. He had no words for what it did to him. The weight of it. The implication buried in those lines. Not angry, not accusing. Just a quiet unveiling of a truth he had never imagined and somehow always feared. 3 reasons. 3. He closed his eyes but couldn't outrun the math. 6 years ago. 6 years of silence. 6 years of absence he hadn't known he was guilty of. His thoughts were a storm. What had he missed? First steps? First words? Do they know about him? Did they ask? Did she lie to protect them, or to punish him? He didn't know, and that was the worst part. What he didn't know. A knock at the door yanked him back to the present. He opened it to find Serena, standing like she owned the floor beneath her. "I figured you weren't going to respond to my texts," she said, stepping past him without waiting for permission. Nate didn't answer. He didn't have the bandwidth. Serena turned, saw the email on the screen. "So she told you?" "She did," Nate said. Serena's jaw tightened. "I was protecting you." "No, you were protecting the company," he shot back. "Let's not confuse loyalty with self-interest." "She would have ruined you," Serena snapped. "You were drowning in pressure. An unexpected pregnancy? From a woman who didn't fit the brand? You wouldn't have survived it." "I didn't survive it," he said, his voice sharp and low. "I just didn't know it." The room fell silent. Serena folded her arms, face unreadable. "What are you going to do?" He looked at the screen again, at the words that changed everything. "I'm going to meet my children," he said, "and this time I'm going to show up." That night, as Ava tucked the boys into bed, Levi pulled her hand and asked quietly, "Mom, do you think he'll be like us?" Her throat caught. "Maybe," she said. "In some ways." Levi nodded, eyes serious. "Then I think I'll give him a chance." Ava kissed his forehead and turned off the light, heart swelling and breaking at the same time. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the first notes of change. Something had shifted. Not just in Nate. In all of them. The past wasn't gone, but it wasn't the only thing left. The phone rang twice before Rosa picked up, her voice crackling through the line with just enough sleep in it to make Ava regret calling. "Tell me it's not the flu again," Rosa murmured. Ava exhaled. Number. "It's not the flu." There was a beat of silence, then the rustle of fabric and Rosa's voice sharpening into alertness. "You sound like you're about to make a mistake." "I might be," Ava said. "Or a choice." Rosa grunted. "Same thing some days." Ava walked through the quiet apartment, her boys still asleep, the early morning light just beginning to silver the windows. On the kitchen table sat the open laptop. The Seattle Children's job offer was still glowing on the screen. 6 figures, research funding, a relocation package, a fresh start. "I haven't told the boys yet," Ava said. "Or him. You haven't told him you might be leaving?" Number not yet. Rosa sighed. "Do you want me to tell you not to go?" "I want you to tell me why I'm afraid to stay." A long pause. Then gently. "Because staying means being vulnerable, and leaving means being safe. You've lived on instinct so long, Ava. I think you forgot what it feels like to hope." Ava swallowed hard. "He's not the same." "No," Rosa said, "and neither are you." The line went quiet for a moment, both women sitting in the space between past and possibility. "I should go," Ava said finally. "You should do what makes you proud 10 years from now," Rosa replied. "That's what I tell myself when I want to run." Ava smiled faintly. "Thank you. Don't thank me until the dust settles. And if you do go to Seattle," Rosa added, her voice dipping into a playful growl, "I'm visiting twice a year and I'm not sharing a hotel room." Click. Ava stood still, the dial tone humming softly in her ear. Then she turned to the screen again. Seattle could wait, a few days at least. So could running. Across the city, Nate sat at his dining table, which hadn't been used for more than a meeting or a meal delivery in months. But now it was covered in papers, articles, clippings, reports, all from the same private investigator he'd hired 2 days ago. Every photo of Ava with the boys unraveled him. In one, they were playing in a city park, Ava sitting cross-legged while Levi adjusted her sunglasses. In another, Eli hugged her leg as she tried to stir a drink from a sidewalk cafe. Then there was Luca running ahead on a museum lawn, arms spread like wings. Nate didn't know how to feel. Grief wasn't the right word. It wasn't loss. He'd never had them to begin with. It was more like a splinter under the skin of his life, now pushing out through his chest in the most painful way. He had missed everything. The first laughs, the fevers, the birthdays and tantrums and tiny triumphs that built the fabric of family. He hadn't just missed being there. He hadn't even known to miss it. A soft knock came at the door. He opened it to find Elliot, his old college roommate and closest friend, now an architectural designer and one of the few people Nate still trusted. "You look like hell," Elliot said, stepping in. "I feel worse," Nate replied. Elliot glanced at the table. "So it's true?" "They're mine," Nate said, sitting down heavily. "All 3. Elliot didn't respond for a beat. Then he whistled low. "Triplets. That's damn." Nate ran a hand through his hair. "I thought building a company from nothing was hard. And now you've got 3 employees who can't tie their own shoes. I don't even know what they like. I don't know what they're afraid of. What songs they sing in the car." "You'll learn," Elliot said quietly, "but not if you keep acting like the guy who disappeared." Nate looked up sharply. "I didn't choose to disappear." "Number. But you didn't try to stay either." That landed. Nate leaned back, suddenly exhausted. "I'm not trying to fix things overnight. I want a chance." "Then show up," Elliot said. "No speeches, no PR, just be there." He stood to leave, then added, "You don't need to know who they are today. You just need to want to know them tomorrow." Nate nodded. And for the first time in days, he felt the slightest, smallest shift. Not clarity, but direction. That evening, Ava sat beside Levi as he drew a map. "Our family adventure route," he called it. It was mostly squiggles and arrows, but one point was clearly marked with a gold star and labeled, "Nate's Wedding." Ava's heart caught in her throat. "Can we wear ties?" Luca asked from the floor, sorting through socks. "Sure," she said, voice gentle. "If you want." "I want to be fancy," Luca added. "So he knows we're important." Ava leaned down and kissed the top of his head. He'll know. And she hoped, with every fragile piece of her heart, that this time he would look. The night before the wedding shimmered in crystal and nerves. The ballroom of the Harrington Grand Hotel was already half-dressed for the ceremony. Rows of gold-trimmed chairs stood like soldiers under chandeliers, and the scent of hydrangeas and sandalwood filled the air. Everything gleamed, perfection curated down to the temperature of the champagne. Nate stood near the back, watching staff hustle in quiet rhythm. The rehearsal dinner was over. Guests had filtered to their suites or to the rooftop bar, but he remained, rooted, a half-drained glass of scotch in his hand and a storm behind his eyes. He hadn't spoken to Madison since yesterday. Not really. She'd noticed. "You're here, but you're not here," she'd said under her breath at dinner, flashing her public smile while gripping his hand too tightly beneath the tablecloth. He hadn't known what to say, still didn't. Now the sound of heels on marble broke the hush behind him. Serena, wrapped in black, hair slicked into its usual blade of control. "We need to talk," she said, skipping pretense. Nate didn't turn. "We've talked enough. Not about this. You mean about the life you carved for me behind my back?" She stepped closer. "I made decisions, smart ones. You're the youngest billionaire in this country because I removed your distractions." His jaw tensed. "You mean my family?" Serena folded her arms. "You didn't have one. You had a woman who didn't belong in your world and a crisis you couldn't handle. You don't get to decide what I could handle." "No," she said quietly. "But I watched you burn out once. I wasn't going to let you crash with everything on the line." Nate turned to face her, the weight of years between them. "You didn't protect me," he said. "You amputated a part of me and told me it was healing." She flinched, just slightly, but it was there. "I saw the boys," he added. "They're not an interruption. They're my legacy. Not this empire, not the stock price. Them." "And what about Madison?" Serena asked, arms tightening around herself. "What about the woman who said yes when you asked her to build a life with you?" Nate stared at her. "Did I ask? Or did I check the last box?" Serena stepped back, rattled for the first time. "You don't know what you're doing." "No," he said, "but for once I'm going to do it with my own hands." Then he walked away, not waiting for her rebuttal. Upstairs, Madison stood by the window of the penthouse suite, flawless in silk and pearls. The skyline reflected in the glass like a crown she already wore. She heard the door before she turned. "You missed the dessert course," she said softly, her voice even. "I wasn't hungry." He crossed the room and sat on the armrest of the nearest chair, suddenly unable to look directly at her. "You've changed," she said, not accusing, just observant. "I found out something," he admitted. "Something that changes everything." "I know," she said. He looked up, startled. "I may not be the one who built Ellis Quantum," she said, "but I've been in enough rooms to know when a man's mind is somewhere else. You've been unraveling for days. I didn't want it to happen this way. I believe you. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did," she said, "and now you have a choice. Marry me for appearances, or walk away for truth." She turned to face him fully now, eyes clear. "Don't give me a performance tomorrow, Nathaniel. I'm not some side piece desperate for a last name. I wanted a partner. I deserved one." "You did," he said, meaning it. "And you still can be someone's, but not mine." They stood in silence, the weight of quiet finality settling between them. "Will you be okay?" he asked, almost afraid of her answer. She smiled, faint and sad. "I always land on my feet. The real question is, will you?" Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment across the city, Ava stood beside the boys' twin beds, her fingers smoothing Levi's blanket for the third time, even though he was already asleep. Rosa stood by the door, arms folded. "You're doing it again," she said. "What?" "Trying to tidy something you can't control." Ava exhaled. "I keep thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if bringing them tomorrow isn't about closure but chaos?" Rosa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you're wrong, they'll survive it, because they have you. And if you're right, then maybe you all get something back that never should have been taken." Ava nodded, fighting the lump rising in her throat. "You still have that letter?" Rosa asked. Ava pulled open a drawer and held up the old envelope, now soft with age, its edges curved like it had grown tired of waiting. "I do." "Then maybe tomorrow," Rosa said. "It's time he reads it." That night, as the city dimmed and the noise gave way to silence, two people lay awake on opposite sides of it, neither sure what the morning would bring. But one thing was certain: the script had changed. And the truth was coming, one heartbeat at a time. The wedding morning arrived shrouded in unnatural stillness. Rain tapped softly at the wide hotel windows, a slow and steady rhythm against the luxury silence. Outside, the streets glistened, washed clean by the early storm. Inside, Nate stood alone in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting a tie he no longer cared to wear. The suit was custom. The wedding, meticulously crafted down to the imported orchids in the foyer, was set to begin in 4 hours. But the man staring back at him looked more like someone preparing for a funeral. He turned from the mirror, unknotted the tie, and tossed it onto the chair. It was time. He left the room without ceremony, descending the private elevator to the lobby. In the ballroom, Serena stood directing final preparations, her phone pressed to one ear, clipboard tucked under her arm. When she saw Nate enter, alone and dressed in an open-collared shirt, her breath hitched in the worst way. She knew. "Nate?" "It's off," he said flatly. Serena blinked. "What?" "The wedding. Cancel it." The event staff around them froze mid-movement. One man holding a floral arrangement literally dropped a sprig of eucalyptus in surprise. "You can't cancel it now," Serena hissed, stepping closer. "The press is already outside. Half of Manhattan's elite are booked into this building." "I don't care," Nate said. "Call it off. This is reckless." "No," he said, quieter now. "What was reckless was letting someone else live my life for 6 years while I wore a mask you approved." Her eyes narrowed, but her voice softened. "What about her? Ava?" "She's not here for me," Nate said. "She's coming, so I'll see the truth. And I will." Serena's voice broke slightly. "Do you even know what she wants?" "No," he admitted. "But I know what I want. A second chance. Not at a wedding. At a life." She looked at him for a long time, and for the first time in their entire partnership, said nothing. Nate turned and walked out, leaving the sound of shattered plans behind him. 10 blocks away, in a modest walk-up in Wicker Park, Ava was slipping a red clip into Eli's hair. He insisted it matched his special socks, though no one could quite see how. Levi sat on the couch, solemn in his button-down shirt, flipping through the pages of a National Geographic he couldn't read but liked to pretend he could. Luca adjusted his mini blazer for the 5th time. "Will there be cameras?" Ava knelt to fix his collar. "Probably." "Should I smile or be serious?" She smiled faintly. "You be yourself. That's all you ever need to be." Rosa hovered in the hallway, coat in hand, holding up a worn envelope. "You sure?" Ava looked at it for a long moment, then nodded. He needs to read it, before anything else. She slipped the letter into her purse. Her hand lingered on the clasp as if holding a piece of herself there. Then she stood and looked at her boys, 3 pieces of her heart walking around in mismatched shoes. "Ready?" "Ready," they echoed in unison. By the time they arrived, the rain had stopped. The sky had shifted to an uncertain gray, as if the morning had asked a question and was waiting on the answer. Ava stepped out of the cab first, then held each of the boys' hands as they emerged onto the slick pavement in front of the hotel. Inside, staff scrambled to reorient the layout. Guests were being redirected. Photographers stood by, baffled. The floral arch was still intact, but now there would be no bride, just a reckoning. Ava entered the lobby with her sons at her side. The heels of her boots clicked softly against the marble. Heads turned, eyes followed. Nate was already waiting. He stepped forward, still in that open-collar shirt, no tie, no ceremony, just him. His gaze dropped from Ava's face to the 3 small boys standing beside her. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Eli took a half step forward, tilting his head. "You're taller than I thought." Nate knelt, slowly, eyes level with the boys. "And you're braver than I ever was," he said, voice rough with emotion. Luca stared at his shoes. "These are for fancy people. I don't like them." "I don't either," Nate said, smiling slightly. Levi held back, half a step behind the others. Ava watched as Nate met his eyes and didn't force the moment, just waited. That's when she knew. He was trying. She reached into her purse and took out the envelope. Nate stood and took it from her hands, brow furrowing as he recognized the writing. "I wrote this the day I heard 3 heartbeats," she said quietly. "I was alone in a clinic. I didn't even know how to breathe, much less write. But I did." He opened the envelope with shaking fingers, read the first line, and sat down on the edge of the lobby bench like someone had unplugged gravity. "I should have been there," he whispered. "You weren't," Ava said, "but now you are." The boys didn't understand the weight of it all, but they understood enough, that this man might be theirs, that today was not a wedding, but it was a beginning. The ballroom had been cleared, but the silence that filled it now was heavier than any music could have been. Ava stood by the far window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the clouds shift above the city. The boys had been whisked away to a nearby lounge with Rosa, juice boxes and crayons in hand, unaware of how fragile the next few moments were. Nate paced behind her, still clutching the letter like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "She wrote 3 heartbeats," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "You were 26, alone, and I never showed up." Ava turned slowly, her voice low. "You didn't know." "I should have," he said, eyes wide with something dangerously close to self-hatred. "I should have known the minute I didn't hear from you that something was wrong." "You were building your empire," she said evenly. "I was just the detour you didn't take." He flinched. "That's not fair," he said. "No," she replied. "But it's true." The truth hung between them like fog, dense, unavoidable. He stepped closer. "Do you think I wouldn't have come? That I wouldn't have been there if I'd known?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter what you would have done. It matters what you didn't do. And I lived that every single day for 6 years, with 3 little boys who had questions I couldn't answer." His shoulders sagged. "I deserve every word." "No," she said, softer now. "You don't deserve blame. You deserve responsibility. There's a difference." Nate looked at her, his voice breaking. "I want to be their father, Ava. Wanting doesn't make it real. I'll learn." "You'll stumble," she said. "They'll see you fall. You'll miss cues, say the wrong thing. You'll disappoint them." "I already have." Ava's expression wavered. "And if you disappear again?" "I won't," he said. She looked him dead in the eye. "Say that to them. Not to me." Nate nodded, chest tight with 1,000 things he couldn't undo. He stepped back toward the door, his voice quiet. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for the chance to show up, consistently, silently, if I have to, as many days as it takes. Ava turned back toward the window. Then start tomorrow, not with gifts or grand gestures. Start with presence. Start with patience. He hesitated. And you? She didn't answer right away. Then finally she spoke without turning around. I'll be watching. Like they will. Like I always have. Later that night, Ava lay awake in bed while the boys slept soundly in the next room. Their quiet breathing was the only sound she trusted anymore. Everything else, words, promises, gestures, felt like currency that had been devalued too many times. She thought about the letter, about the way Nate read it like it was scripture, not paper. She thought about how he looked at the boys, not like they were strangers, like they were his. Still, part of her braced for the fall, because love had taught her not to lean. Just then, a buzz came from her phone on the nightstand. A message. From Nathaniel Ellis. Would you mind if I came by tomorrow morning? I'd like to learn how they take their cereal. She stared at it for a long moment, unsure if it was absurd or perfect. She typed back 2 words. Be on time. And for the first time in years, Ava smiled before falling asleep. Across the city, Nate sat alone in his empty penthouse. No planner, no ceremony, no bride. Just a man with a letter in his hand and a promise in his chest. The city lights twinkled like stars trying to be noticed, and for once he didn't feel above them. He felt human, small, hopeful, ready. The sky cracked open just after dawn. A spring storm rolled in over Chicago like a warning shot, low thunder rumbling in the distance, fat drops of rain tapping the sidewalk in hesitant rhythm. Ava stood at the edge of her building stoop, umbrella in hand, watching the clouds shift with a strange calm inside her. It wasn't nerves. It was something deeper, something bone-deep and resolute. Today wasn't about Nate. It was about the boys. Behind her, the apartment door opened and Rosa stepped out, holding Levi's jacket and a folded drawing from Luca. They're ready, she said. Ava turned, nodded. Her chest tightened when she saw them. 3 boys in 2 big jackets, freshly combed hair, and eyes full of questions they didn't know how to ask. Is it still okay if I wear my cape? Luca asked. Ava knelt in front of him and adjusted the red superhero cape tied neatly around his shoulders. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Levi slipped his small hand into hers. What if he doesn't come? Ava met his eyes. Then we'll leave. Together. And you'll still be just as brave. They arrived at the park 10 minutes before 9. Central Park Terrace. A quiet section Nate had asked to meet them at. There was no press, no staged photos, just wet benches and the promise of a clearing sky. Ava looked around. Empty. She checked her phone. 8:57. Eli climbed into her lap. Is this one of those things where we wait and then get ice cream after? Ava smiled softly. If it is, it's the good kind. Then she heard footsteps. Slow, steady, unrushed. Nate emerged from the path wearing jeans and a gray sweater, umbrella tucked beneath his arm. No driver, no entourage, just him. When he saw them, he stopped for a breath, like the air had been knocked from him. Ava stood, heart steady but cautious. You're on time, she said. He nodded. I set 3 alarms. The boys turned, uncertain. Luca was the first to approach, dragging his sneaker across the gravel. Do you still have shiny shoes? Nate looked down, then wiggled his foot. Not today. These are sneakers. For superheroes. Luca grinned, cape fluttering. Okay, you can sit by me. Eli followed, clutching a juice pouch he'd refused to let go of. He studied Nate for a long second, then offered the unopened pouch. It's cherry, he whispered. Not everyone likes cherry. I do, Nate said. Levi stood a few steps back, arms crossed. Ava watched closely. Nate knelt again, same as he had in the hotel lobby, but said nothing this time. Just waited. Levi frowned. What do you do? I build things. What kind of things? Programs, companies. But I've never built a family. Levi tilted his head. You're kind of late. I am. Are you going to leave again? No, Nate said, his voice unwavering. I came late, but I'm staying. Levi said nothing. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A drawing, 4 stick figures. 1 tall, 3 small. 1 wore a cape. Luca drew it. I told him he could give it to you, but he said only if I wanted to. Nate took the drawing with trembling hands. Thank you. Ava's throat tightened. Nate stood and turned to her. I brought something. She raised an eyebrow. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small roll-up keyboard. White keys. Travel-sized. It's not much, but I thought maybe they'd want to show me what music they like. Ava stared at the keyboard, then at him. You remember I played? Every night. You'd hum when you cooked. Drove me crazy. I still hum. I still remember. The storm passed behind them. Rain slowed. Sunlight peeked through, touching the tops of the trees. Luca pulled on Ava's coat. Can we show him the thunder song? Ava nodded, blinking fast. And on that park bench, under a patchy gray sky and an unfolding new morning, the triplets lined up and sang their thunder song, a made-up tune with claps and stomps and completely chaotic lyrics. Nate sat beside them, out of sync but trying, not polished, not poised, just present. Ava watched, one hand pressed over her heart, the other clutching the umbrella. She wasn't sure what tomorrow held, but for the first time in a long time she wasn't scared to find out. The sound of their laughter stayed with him long after they left the park. Nate sat in the back of a cab, the boys' voices still echoing, high, unfiltered, full of life. He didn't realize until they were gone how much weight he'd been holding in his chest. Now the space they'd filled was both light and unbearably empty. His phone buzzed. Serena. He ignored it. Again, he was done being steered. Instead, he stared out the window as the streets blurred past, mind looping with every tiny detail. Eli's juice-sticky hands, Levi's skeptical stare, Luca's cape snapping in the breeze. They were real, and they were his. But so were the mistakes. So was the time lost. By the time he got home, the city was sliding into evening. His penthouse glowed with ambient lights and automated warmth, but it felt more sterile than ever. Too big, too quiet, too curated. He stepped inside, dropped his keys on the counter, and reached for his phone. To Ava Monroe. Thank you for today, for letting me meet them. I know I've missed years I can't earn back, but if you're willing, I want to start showing up. The cursor blinked. He hovered over send, paused, then deleted the message. Words weren't enough. He needed to do more than say it. He had to prove it. Ava watched the boys sleep, one by one. Eli was first, out cold, his superhero socks kicked half off. Then Luca, still holding Nate's drawing in one hand, his other curled under his cheek. Levi, always last, lay on his back staring at the ceiling, quiet and restless in a way she knew all too well. She sat on the edge of his bed and brushed her hand gently through his curls. "You okay?" she whispered. He turned to her, eyes wide open. "Do you think he meant it?" Ava blinked. Meant what? When he said he was staying. Her throat tightened. "I think he wants to. Really wants to." "That's not the same," Levi said, voice small but sure. "No," she agreed. "It's not." He nodded satisfied and rolled over. She sat there a while longer, staring into the dark, holding space for a hope she didn't dare name. 3 days passed. Nate didn't text, didn't call, no packages, no fanfare, just silence. On the 4th day, Ava opened the door to find a box on her doormat. No note, no branding, just her name in block handwriting. She brought it inside, opened the flaps, and froze. Inside was a child-sized tool belt, 3 mini sets of headphones, and one worn second-hand book, How to Fix a Bike. It was the same book he'd been reading when she met him in their 20s. Greasy hands turning the pages on a rusted Schwinn frame, saying he'd fix it, even if it killed him. Beneath the book was a handwritten letter. Ava, they won't remember my empire, but maybe they'll remember we built something together, even if it's just a bike. Saturday morning, there's a park 3 blocks from you. Bring the boys if you want. If not, I'll be there anyway, with 3 bikes that need fixing. I'll be late sometimes. I'll mess up, but I won't walk away. Nate. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. Saturday morning came too early. Luca's cape had somehow become a scarf. Eli had jammed one foot into a rain boot and the other into a sneaker. Levi asked twice if they could just stay home and read instead. But they went. And when they reached the park, there he was. No cameras, no crowd. Just Nate, sitting on a picnic table bench with a toolkit spread wide and 3 bikes laid out in disrepair. He stood when he saw them, smiled without expectation. "Morning," he said. "Are they real?" Luca asked, pointing at the bikes. "They're real, and broken." "Good," Eli said. "I like broken stuff." Nate grinned. "So do I." Levi hung back again, but this time Ava didn't say a word. She let him watch, let all of them choose, and slowly, inch by inch, they did. They gathered around him and built something that didn't exist before. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the first brick. Later that evening, as they walked home, Ava glanced down and saw that Levi was holding something. One of the tools from the kit. A small plastic-handled wrench. "You took that?" she asked, teasing. "I asked him first." "And he said yes?" "He said to keep it until I trusted him not to need it back." Ava swallowed. Smart man. She looked up at the sky, now streaked with pink and fading gold. Some storms didn't announce their arrival. Others, she thought, arrived just in time to clear the path. The late afternoon light filtered through Ava's kitchen like a soft sigh, catching the specks of flour on her sweater. Eli had insisted on helping her make cookies, though he'd mostly stirred flour onto the floor, and now she stood at the sink while he played in the living room, humming the Thunder song to himself with offbeat claps and whisper singing. It had been a week since the park, 7 days since Nate had handed over a toolbox instead of a promise, and every day since he had shown up, early mornings, slow evenings, no agenda, no press, no polished lines, just a man with his sleeves rolled, trying to learn 3 little hearts one question at a time. But Ava hadn't given him an answer. Not about the boys, not about herself. And he hadn't asked for one. Until today. She turned when she heard the knock. Nate stood in the hallway, hair tousled, eyes soft. Not rehearsed, just real. "I know it's not Saturday," he said. "Come in," she replied, stepping aside without hesitation. He paused at the threshold, looking around like he was still adjusting to being invited in. "They're not here?" "Rosa took them for the afternoon. I told her I needed a minute. I guess this is the minute." He nodded. "Okay." Ava leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You've been consistent." "I meant it when I said I would be. That's not what impresses me." Nate looked at her confused. "What impresses me," she continued, "is that you haven't tried to charm your way back in. No speeches, no grand gestures, just effort, quiet, honest effort. He stepped closer, expression unreadable. "I didn't come to make this harder," he said, "but I brought something, one last thing, if you'll read it." He reached into his jacket and handed her an envelope, this time addressed in his handwriting. She took it, lips parting slightly. "Are you leaving it with me?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'll wait, if you want." She nodded once and broke the seal. Inside, the letter was short. "Ava, I didn't write this to ask for forgiveness. I wrote it because you deserve to hear what I couldn't say out loud. I left because I thought I had to build a legacy. But I didn't realize you were the start of it. Not the company, not the title. You. And them. The nights you hummed while sorting charts. The way you laughed when your coffee spilled on my code. The way you looked at me like I was already someone, even when I wasn't. I'm not asking for a clean slate. I'm asking for a chapter, a beginning where I get to be in the story, not just the footnote. If you turn the page, I'll be there." Ava blinked away tears she hadn't expected. When she looked up, he was watching her, not with hope, but with humility. "You didn't sign it, love," she said. "I didn't want to assume." She held his gaze. "I didn't want to hope." The space between them felt fragile. Then she stepped forward and placed the letter on the counter. "I never stopped loving you," she said quietly. "But love without trust is just memory, and I can't raise 3 boys on memory." He nodded. "Then let's build trust, from the ground up. No guarantees," she warned. "No exits," he promised. She hesitated for just a moment longer. Then she reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers like they belonged there. "I'll turn the page," she said. Outside, the city buzzed with ordinary noise, but in that small, sun-drenched kitchen, a new story began. Not perfect, not easy, not solved, but shared, and finally, moving forward. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled Ava's kitchen as Nate carefully set the tray on the counter, hands dusted with flour and pride. He hadn't burned them this time. That alone felt like a win. Levi peeked around the corner from the hallway, still skeptical. "Did you follow the recipe this time?" "I even measured," Nate said, wiping his hands on a towel. Levi crossed his arms. "Mom says love doesn't need to be measured, just tasted." Ava, leaning against the doorframe with her coffee, arched an eyebrow. "That's not exactly what I said." "It's close." Levi shrugged. Nate laughed, but quietly. He didn't want to overplay anything. Every interaction still felt like a test, like they were watching to see if he'd fade again. But today was different. Today, Ava had invited him to stay past breakfast. The boys had moved from suspicion to tolerance to cautious excitement. Luca asked for Nate's help drawing a better dragon. Eli insisted he watch every episode of their favorite cartoon, twice. Levi? He held out a little longer, measuring trust like teaspoons of sugar. But he stayed in the room now. That was something. After the breakfast dishes were done and the boys were chasing each other with superhero socks on their hands, Nate stepped into the living room and noticed the upright piano tucked against the far wall, silent and clean as if waiting. He hesitated. Ava noticed. "Play something," she said. He looked back at her. "You sure?" She nodded, stepping closer, lowering her voice. "They've never heard me play. They think the keys are just furniture." Nate smiled faintly and sat down, hands hovering over the keys. He pressed a few tentative notes, then settled into the melody of Let It Be, soft, slow, imperfect. The boys grew quiet. Eli crept over first, crawling onto the rug to watch. Luca followed, flopping beside him. Even Levi, from the hallway, leaned against the wall, arms crossed but listening. When Nate reached the last chord, he looked up. Luca clapped, Eli bounced. Levi, silent, just said, "That was good." It was all Nate needed. He stood, stretched his back, and caught Ava watching him. Not with caution, not this time, but with something warmer. Something like relief. "That's the first time I've played since before the IPO," he said. "You still hum when you concentrate," she replied. "Always." They stood in the middle of her living room, surrounded by cereal boxes, scattered crayons, and 3 half-eaten muffins, and yet it felt whole. Nate turned toward her, voice softer now. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. If we do this, whatever this is, we're doing it," she interrupted, slowly. "Right. But if we keep going, I want to build something for them. Not flashy. Not trust funds and college plaques. Something that matters." Ava tilted her head. "Like what?" "I want to start a foundation," he said. "In your name. For pediatric medicine. For working moms. For kids who don't have advocates. I'll fund it, but it's yours." She blinked, surprised. "You'd give up that kind of control?" He nodded. "I've built things for power. This time I want to build something for them. Something that doesn't vanish when a board votes it down." Ava said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Okay. Okay? You can build it. But only if I choose the name." Nate smiled. "Deal. And we do it together. Every part, always." She stepped closer. "You're not buying forgiveness with a grant, Nate." "I know," he said. "I'm trying to earn a future." Her eyes shimmered but didn't fall. Levi poked his head in. "Are you guys going to kiss or something?" Ava blushed. Nate grinned. "Not yet," he said, looking at her. Levi nodded, satisfied. "Cool. But just so you know, Eli thinks you're already part of the team." Then he ducked out. Nate turned back to Ava. "Is that true?" She stepped close enough that their shoulders brushed. "He's not wrong." Outside, the sun had begun to break through the clouds. Inside, the house, still messy, still noisy, still wild, felt like something new. Not a beginning, a continuation of a story they had nearly lost, and now might finally get right. The spring sun spilled over Lincoln Park like a blessing. Ava stood beneath the shade of an old oak, watching her boys dart between benches and picnic blankets, superhero capes still fluttering despite the warm breeze. Nate chased them at half speed, letting himself be caught, then dramatically collapsing onto the grass as Luca declared victory. It had been 3 months. 3 months since the wedding that wasn't. Since 3 little boys walked into a stranger's life and rewrote the ending of his story. Since Ava let herself believe that something lost might still be rebuilt. Now there was rhythm, not perfection, but a rhythm. Nate picked up Eli and spun him around until his laughter rang out like bells. Levi, now skeptical only in theory, quietly handed Nate a juice box without being asked. Luca tried to wrap a cape around Nate's neck, declaring him the great repairman. He wore it with pride. A few yards away, Rosa unpacked a container of homemade empanadas and called over to Ava with a wink. "Your man just tried to zip-tie his sunglasses to his shirt." "He's learning," Ava replied, laughing. Rosa strolled over, lowering her voice. "You know, I wasn't sure at first." Ava looked at her. "About him?" "About all of it. You, him, this." She gestured to the laughter, the sunshine, the blur of kids and chaos. "But I see it now. You didn't fold. You rebuilt." Ava's eyes misted as she watched Nate hoist Luca onto his shoulders. "I didn't think I could." "You didn't do it alone," Rosa said, squeezing her arm. "None of us do." A moment later, a woman with a camera slung over her shoulder approached the group. Family photographer Nate had hired quietly, no fanfare, no Instagram tags. "I can get a few candid shots," she said with a smile. "Just let the boys play." And they did. Ava sat on the blanket, knees curled beneath her. Nate dropped down beside her, arm brushing hers. "They're chaos," he said. "They're magic," she corrected. "They're both," he grinned. "Like you." She shook her head, still not charmed by the lines. He leaned closer, voice low. "Then how about this? I've never had anything this good that I didn't earn." She turned to him. "You still are." He nodded. "Every day." The photographer stepped forward. "Can I get one of just the two of you?" They looked at each other, then nodded. They sat side by side on the blanket, neither posing, neither smiling too hard, just present, just real. The shutter clicked. One photo, one moment, one truth. Weeks later, Ava stood in the entryway of her apartment, sorting mail and kid art and a half-eaten granola bar from someone's jacket pocket. The boys were already arguing about bedtime routines they didn't intend to follow. She opened a small envelope with heavy paper stock. A letter from the Ava Monroe Pediatric Foundation, newly filed and official. It listed her as director. The second page included something unexpected. A donors list. Anonymous. But Ava knew. Not just because of the amount. Because of the timing. Because some things didn't need names. She walked to the living room, pausing by the wall where the boys' art rotated like gallery exhibits. One new edition had been framed, quietly, without announcement. The photo. Nate and Ava side by side, not posed, not pretending. Behind them, blurred in motion, were 3 laughing boys and a red superhero cape caught mid-air. The caption written in Levi's blocky letters said, "Everyone is here now." Ava smiled. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs.